This is Duke University.
All black, everything, everything black, culture over everything, y'all, we taking it back, black.
Welcome to Left of Black. I'm your host, Mark Anthony Neal. We're here today in the John Hope Franklin Center, and we're joined by Reverend Cedric Harmon, who's the co-director of Many Voices, a Black church movement for gay and transgender justice. And we're also joined by Katina Parker, filmmaker, photographer, writer, graphic designer, cultural curator, social media expert, and communications consultant. Her credits include the film Peace Process, several music videos for the artist Justin Robinson, and also the curator of the photo exhibit 1 Million Strong. And you're here with us today to talk about the Many Voices video campaign.
Yes.
Reverend Harmon, could you start, just tell us a little bit about Many Voices?
Many Voices is, as you described, a nonprofit that works within the Black church, within the Black religious community, to foster and create a community that's committed to justice for LGBTQ people. There's this pernicious notion that to be LGBTQ is not consistent with being Christian.
Right.
And then there's the further pernicious notion that we know what religious people think about LGBT equality. And we are working to make sure that we elevate the voices of support that have always been in the Black church.
Now, you're based in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Actually based in Washington, D.C., but happy to be working in the state of North Carolina.
And, you know, North Carolina over the last year and a half has been, you know, really almost like a ground zero around some of these conversations. I can remember doing the 2012 campaign. I mean, hearing radio ads from Black ministers, you know, actually telling people to stay home.
Yes.
You know, because the president was in supporter of same-sex marriage. Have you found it difficult trying to navigate these waters?
There's always the challenge when there's a pre-existing notion.
Yeah.
But what I'm happy about is in May of that year, the president made his announcement, the NAACP made its national announcement of support, and that opened up existing conversations that had been had quietly. Now they're in the public sphere. Yeah. And I see that as a great opportunity that we're seizing.
Tell us about the video campaign. Of course, Katina, you're shooting it, you're directing it, you're curating it. You know, what are you hoping to achieve with the video campaign?
Well, we're hoping to present the stories of LGBTQ people, gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, and queer-identified folks, who, just like everyone else in the African-American community, know that the church occupies a very special place in our lives and in our history, and also in our identity. So these are folks that are speaking that have a deep and profound spirituality. Some of them have journeyed and navigated the waters of spirituality to find a place that works for them, but that connection to the church has not been lost. It's always there. It's a sense of family, community, and connection.
I mean, that's always been one of the things that struck me about what's unique about the Black experience, particularly on this notion of coming out. You know, for many Black folks to come out is actually to risk those connections to family and institutions, right? You know, whether it's your actual family or church home as institution, I mean, it creates a lot of challenges in that regard. And so I imagine the work that you're doing particularly is important here because it allows people even to find kind of a middle ground.
Indeed, yes. And also to challenge the religious community, church leaders, pastors, to understand the harm that's caused when negative things are said and the longing to remain connected that some do not realize, that people are not thrilled.
You're watching Left of Black. I'm your host, Mark Anthony Neal. We're joined by Reverend Cedric Harmon, who's the co-director of the Many Voices organization. We're also here with filmmaker Katina Parker, who has been behind the curating of the video campaign for Many Voices. How did you get involved in this, Katina?
Cedric reached out to me and asked me to be involved, and I was more than happy to do so. I've been in North Carolina for about 5 years now. Came in from LA, and with some of the things that have been happening politically, I've been really concerned, especially since the most recent election, and was pleased to hear that resources and time are being invested in this area to create visibility for Black LGBTQ people. One of the reasons that I got involved is because when people were voting for or against Amendment 1, I was working at the state capitol and walked out of the building directly into a conversation between two African-American women in which one woman was saying, oh no, we're supposed to vote for, and another woman was saying, we're supposed to vote against. And one of the women cited that Billy Graham had, basically said, this is gonna destroy our families. We need to shut this down. And the other woman said, yeah, but when my pastor told me that when you really look at what is being said, basically voting against gay marriage is actually what destroys our families, because it just doesn't just affect gay marriage, it affects so many other family relationships that are specific to the way that we form family. And I couldn't help myself. I jumped right in and I said, no, this is actually what you need to do. Right. Anytime they start saying voting against gay marriage, we are voting against ourselves. Yeah. Right, because of the way that we form family. But what was
talk a little bit about that, Katina, because I think what a lot of people miss, and I remember having this conversation with cats in the barbershop around that same time, that what we see as something that's voting against same-sex marriage really is voting against any kind of coupling that doesn't fit into traditional heterosexual marriage, right? So that's even if there's two heterosexual couples who are living together, right? I mean, you're voting against even that in that context. Now, I don't think most folks see that kind of dynamic when they take on these kinds of issues.
Mm-hmm. I don't think so, but I think sometimes we are easily led astray, like we're baited and switched, if you will. Yeah. But within my own family, there are lots of long-term couples that are not necessarily married. Right. There are lots of people who were married who are divorced, but still kind of
together, right?
Partners,
and taking care of children in that context,
children. Right. Yeah. Right. And this is what we do. Like, we love beyond borders, and we love beyond laws.
Yeah. Wow.
I think also what's also part of this is that we must recognize that same-gendered couples are raising children. Yeah. And they're more likely to be experiencing poverty or having economic challenges in doing so. And those children need to be covered with insurance and health insurance. Right. And so what we're talking about is the family unit, whatever the makeup of that family is, and we're talking about justice. And so for me, the call is to communities of faith to really take seriously this notion of justice and equality and fairness for all people. And those voices of religious leadership are needed on this issue, supporting, taking care of, and providing for families, children, and people that we love.
Different question for you in this context. We're in a moment, really where in some ways some gay relationships have been able to cross over, if you will, and be mainstream. And in this case, I'm talking about the kind of visibility that we have of white LGBTQ, communities. And they're very politically active and very sophisticated in their political activity. Have you found that those groups have been supportive of groups like Many Voices and other organizations that are really trying to have these serious conversations within Black communities? Or do you even necessarily need them? To be engaged with you at all, to do the kind of work that you're interested in?
We have found that there's a learning curve for those that have already achieved and are feeling their oats around this. That, in fact, this work that we're doing is important to straight identified folks, gay white folks, gay Latino folks. It's important to all of us. As a matter of fact, in many ways, the Black church is a bastion that is named as standing in the way. Yeah. And by elevating the voices that have already been supportive and supporting those that want to learn how to be supportive in effective ways, it's really good for all of us.
Yeah. Do you think that's a fair critique, though? Because I hear the critique all the time that if there's a major impediment, right, to really fully understanding LGBTQ freedoms, if you will, in a society, the Black church is really out there, as one of the major barriers. Is that a fair assessment? Or is the Black church in some way being scapegoated? And I don't just mean in terms of Black communities, but how we think about this issue nationally, right? When you think about what happened out in California, right? And the Black church and Black voters get blamed, for legislation that doesn't happen. So how do you think the Black church is being scapegoated?
I do. Yeah. I do. I was at GLAAD when Prop 8, and I was living in Los Angeles when Prop 8 was on the table, and I witnessed some of the organizing against Prop 8. And what I noticed there is what I noticed here with Amendment 1, and what I've noticed in other places where typically the marriage movement is led by wealthy white gay folks, or some people may call it gay ink. And the reality is that when you're wealthy and white, whether you're gay or you're straight, you don't necessarily have to interface with people of color. Right. You don't necessarily have the cultural fluency to interface with those people. Right. And so what I heard and what I saw was and understanding that the Black church was really essential to partner with, and an otherizing of the Black church because the people who desired to partner with them didn't know how. And so what that wound up turning into is these folks are really homophobic. We need to work on them. It was almost missionary in nature. And consistently that is what has happened with some of these marriage movements, where it's like, we need you, but we got to get you right first.
Right, right. It's interesting. I know sometimes when they do these polls of Black communities about how they feel about, for instance, same-sex marriage, and it's always framed in the kind of way that, that fits really a civil rights sensibility from an LGBTQ sensibility. And when Black folks are critical of that, I don't think they often realize that part of that dynamic is that they're making an assumption that Black folks actually believe that civil rights has been fully achieved. Right, and so what they're really posing the question is that, we want you now to give up on what we think are your quest for Black freedom, to take on another issue. And Black folks are like, well, we don't think we've handled this first thing first, right? And I think most of the polling rarely deals with that kind of dynamic, right? Because it really is just so specific in that regard. We're here with Reverend Cedric Harmon from Many Voices. We're also here with filmmaker and photographer Katina Parker, who is behind curating the video campaign for Many Voices. What has been the response so far?
The response has been phenomenal.
Yeah.
Everybody interviewed is based here in North Carolina. The people featured are Bishop Tanya Rawls of Unity Fellowship Church, Charlotte, Jermaine Lee, who is an activist and an artist who also lives in Charlotte, a young woman named Ayala, who is also from Charlotte.
Cave Cannon.
Yes,
right.
Exactly. Cave Cannon fellow and youth advocate, and used to be an Occupy Wall Streeter. Julie Roxanne Wallace, who lives here in Durham, is the co-founder of Mobile Homecoming. A.M. Morey, who is an activist and poet here in Chapel Hill.
Mm-hmm.
And lastly, Reverend Brendan Boone, who is a transgender person of faith and pastor of MCC Raleigh.
Mm-hmm.
And so the response has been really phenomenal. What we were able to capture was really honest and authentic.
Yeah.
And we've also been able to create some great music.
Yeah.
Great sound
Yes.
to go with it, which is an essential, part of it.
And who's done the music?
A young woman named Layla Nur.
Yeah.
And someone really special to me named Rachel Durrell. And Alexis Pauline Guns and Julie Wallace also contributed to some of the music. We're still doing music, so there may be some more people at another point. But people have been really responsive, I think, to the heartfelt nature of what folks are sharing, and to that struggle. Like, it is the hardest thing in the world when you were sitting on that pew, and you know that the people around you are talking about you, and to do that day in and day out, year in year out, until you are of age and can leave the church,
right?
If you actually leave,
or stand your ground and push back,
like that is the hardest thing in the world, and people relate to that, and not just with regard to gender identity or sexuality, but on any number of other things where the church can sometimes be very judgmental.
You've been very aggressive thus far in terms of the social media aspect of getting the word out and the links out, if you will, about the campaign. How important has social media been to this kind of work now? As opposed to if you were doing this 5 years ago, what does it mean to have access to things like Facebook and Twitter and things like that at this moment?
This wouldn't have happened in this way 5 years ago. 5 years ago, I think I was just leaving GLAAD, and eight years ago, I just started at GLAAD. And there was a real dearth of voices when it came to Black LGBTQ issues. We would get press requests all the time, and it wasn't just that there were a dearth of voices, there were a dearth of people who were spokesperson trained, who were ready for the time. Right. And so over the course of the 3 years that I was there, social media became, started to become what it is, and these voices began to emerge, right? Yeah. And we began to form community and dialogue across Facebook and Twitter and all these other social media advents, and that's what makes this time possible. That there is a burgeoning Black LGBTQ presence on the internet that is looking for themselves. Like, I don't go to church anymore. I grew up church, and I don't go because I don't feel like I can go back. It is never going to be the same. But I can go to YouTube and find a good 24-hour.
Virtual church, yes.
Yes, and I can see what a Sean Crowley has posted, and can I am my friend and say, hey, did you see this? Did you you see Kim Burrell? You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
yeah.
And so there are a lot of us who grew up church and who offer critique for that experience, through social media. Don't necessarily feel like we can go back, but we still celebrate the culture of it, particularly the music and the pageantry and the theatrics and the African-based spirituality of it, the going in, if you will.
How about for you, Cedric? What has social media meant for your ministry and your organizational work?
Well, I mean, we can't ignore the world in which we live and the ways in which we communicate differently now. Hearing a sermon sitting in a pew after 2 hours of free worship may not be for everyone.
Yeah.
And so getting the message out and using social media as an awareness-raising tool and also a teaching tool.
Yeah.
These videos actually help people begin to understand. Sitting in your own home and watching a story that's relatable, someone that could be your sister, your brother, your cousin, your best friend, is a really powerful way in which to communicate the aspirations of these individuals and the meaning of this work to individuals that are viewing it.
What's next for you, both of you?
We have 3 more videos to release. Julia Roxanne Wallace is up next, and we have AMR, and we have Reverend Brendan Bloom to release. We have some editorials coming out to promote the series. And the first step is creating visibility for these voices and for these issues, so that people can connect, with the opportunity to share their own experiences. But next, beyond that is really connecting people to the work of Many Voices, which is getting people involved in creating their own visibility around Black LGBTQ issues, raising their own voices, getting the trainings and things that Many Voices offers.
What's the best way to contact Many Voices?
You can visit us on the web, www.manyvoices.org. You can find us on Facebook, manyvoices.org, Twitter, YouTube, Vimeo, Tumblr, Pinterest, all of the various platforms that are out there.
Many Voices org.
Many Voices org.
You've been watching Left to Black. I'm your host, Mark Anthony Neal. We've been joined today by Reverend Cedric Harmon of Many Voices, co-director, and also filmmaker and photographer and all-around social media and media expert, Katina Parker. Thanks for watching. Welcome to Left to Black. I'm your host, Mark Anthony Neal, and we're joined today in our Left to Black studios with MK Asante to talk about his new book, his memoir, Buck. How are you doing, MK?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me on the show, man.
And so, I'm reading the memoir, man, and it's amazing on the one hand because, it's real talk. You're telling some stories here, and it's not like you can do that in any kind of anonymity.
Yeah.
Right, you're coming from one of the most recognizable names, particularly in terms of Black intellectual thought.
Yeah.
You're married into another kind of very public, Black family in a certain kind of way. So talk a little bit about why you wanted to do a memoir this time. Your first book, of course, examines kind of what it means to be hip hop generation, much more of a scholarly book.
Yeah.
This is much more MK. Why this choice and why now?
Well, my first 2 books are poetry books.
Right.
And those books are really memoirs in a sense. You know what I mean? It's talking about my life growing up. It's really myself, my narrative is in those books of poetry. You know what I mean? My third book, Bigger Than Hip Hop, wasn't really a scholarly endeavor for me. It was actually an artistic endeavor. I've always seen myself as an artist, and so it's Bigger Than Hip Hop. Even though it dealt with, social political issues, I tried to do it in an artistic way. We had a conversation with the ghetto. We had a conversation with hip hop. We were, personifying the ghetto and personifying hip hop and interviewing, entities that aren't real and really trying to be artistic with it. So I've always seen myself as an artist. And, with this book, I wanted to tell my truth. I wanted to tell my story, you know what I mean? And the fact that, my peoples might be well known or I'm affiliated with people's well known, that didn't affect me, honestly. You know what I mean? It's like, I've got to tell my story and this is what it is. You know what I'm saying?
And the story's about you growing up in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
So talk about what it was like, in terms of the streets of Philadelphia and being Black in Philadelphia. There's a scene in the book where you're talking to your brother Uzi, and there's this picture of you and your brother when you all first moved to Philadelphia. And he's like, you were like, I look so shook. And then he reminds you, that was the day of the move bombing. So just talk about that whole reality.
We moved into a city on fire, you know what I mean? Literally, And so my brother talks about that. I mean, it was interesting. I grew up, I feel like, on the intersection of a lot of different things, you know what I mean? So, like, and I talk about it in the book, obviously, you know, all these different influences pulling on me. You got, you know, my pop, you know, with Afrocentricity and everything that he represents, you know what I mean? You've got my mom with a completely different sensibility, struggling with mental health issues, you know what I mean? Very severely suicidal, you know, really, and that's another thing, you know, we wanted to, this book was about, you asked me why now, why? One of the things we wanted to do with this book is break new ground, do things that I haven't seen done before, you know? So, for example, we don't really keep it real and talk about, you know, the mental health issues in the black community, you know what I mean? Like, people feel too afraid to come out and say what's real, but everyone's going through this, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, okay, let's put it out there and really deal with it, you know what I mean? That way we can have a real conversation, we can get through all the bullshit, you know? So anyway, so that was part of it, but you know, so you got my mom, you got my dad, then you've got my brother Uzi, who's always been a street dude, you know what I'm saying? So, you know, all this is pulling at me at the same time.
You're trying to navigate.
Yeah, and then they all leave. You know, they all depart my life in some way. You know what I'm saying? So then I'm just left with the remainder of their influences. And now, you know, Philadelphia, the city is wide open to me. As a young kid, I explored the whole city. North Philly, West Philly, South, I was everywhere.
I mean, one of the running themes in the book are you stealing your mother's car?
Yeah, you know
By the time you're 14 years old.
Oh yeah, it started
for these night
at
rides,
13,
right?
really, you know what I mean? But, you know, but yeah, 13, 14, every night we would be in the whip, you know what I mean? Just exploring. That's why when you know, much later on in the book, when I discovered literature, you know, the first thing I connected to was Jack Kerouac on the road. I'm like, oh, I could feel this. There's something about the spirit here. These dudes, you know, just trying to figure it out, not really having a destination, open to anything, the road, you know, camaraderie, loyalty, little couple joints roll, you know what I mean? That's like
that's what it was.
That's what it was, and so that connected and identified with me when I was like 17. I first started reading, you know what I mean? But yeah, you know, that was just part of it. If it wasn't stealing my mom's car, you know, we were on the bus, you know what I mean? Or we were transporting another way, or however we did it. But we just, you know, it was all about that exploration, and for me, just that was my education. You know, Buck is a book about education. It's about miseducation, re-education, street education, self-education. So that's what it is.
You're watching Left of Black. I'm your host, Mark Anthony Neal. We're joined in studio today at the John Hope Franklin Center with MK Asante, poet, writer, scholar, filmmaker, talking about his new memoir, Buck. One of the things that stood out for me in the book in terms of the structure of the book are the ways that you put in these little hip hop clips, you know, throughout, you know, that just makes us connected. As you're going through all this stuff, there was stuff that you were hearing in your head, there's stuff you're hearing on the radio, there's stuff you're hearing in the streets, it actually resonates to what was going on in your life at the time.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, everybody I grew up with has hip hop Tourette's. You know what I'm saying? And that means, you know, we could be doing whatever. You know, I was just walking into the studio just now. You know what I mean? I was thinking, you know, I got that song lyrics in my head. So the bars just jump out of you. You know, no matter where you are, what you're doing, that hip hop Tourette's, you just had these lyrics that come out of you. And that was my upbringing. You know, everyone I knew, that's how we were. We're still like that. Grown men still doing that. You know what I mean? Grown women. So that was part of our experience. And so I wanted that to be real. I want to interweave that into the story. I wanted to also show how important hip hop was to me as a soundtrack to my life. Also, I wanted to show the connection between what I was listening to and what I was doing. And as the book goes on, what happens is the lyrics change. So as I began to grow and mature intellectually and the things around me, then next, you know, it goes from quoting maybe a Noriega line to I'm in the 35th precinct in jail, and I'm thinking, you know, at exactly which point do you start to realize that life without knowledge is death in disguise? So now I'm on Kweli, I'm on Black Star, and so you see that growth, and then by the end of the book, what do you get? It's not even quoting rappers anymore, it's quoting my own lyrics, you know what I'm saying? So the book is really about finding my own voice, you know? But through all these other voices, you know what I'm saying?
You know, before off camera, you know, when we were sitting there, I talked about the humor of the book, right? And for me, there's several kind of laugh out loud moments. You know, when you kind of discuss how your brother, for instance, and his friends think about your dad,
Yeah.
you know, as Dr. Africa, right?
Yeah,
So it's
yeah.
that kind of thing. And then when you're talking about, you know, it explained to your dad the necessity of being able to download Afrocentric porn, right? And I'm sitting there reading, it's like, no dude didn't just say Janet Jack me in the book. It's like,
yeah, Lexington Steel, all of them. I did that for all my real people out there. They get to that part and they know.
But let's talk a little bit about the dynamic with your father. I mean, in terms of what the pressure is like that. And, you know, the thing that really resonated for me, right, and for those who don't know, you know, MK's dad is the legendary Afrocentric scholar, you know, MK Asante. You know, you joke about the fact that the newspapers were calling him the father of Afrocentricity. I mean, if you go to Google now, right, and you Google Afrocentricity, that's exactly what's going to come up. But what was it like for you trying to navigate that space? And the piece that really resonated for me was the fact that, you know, he was on the road all the time. And that comes up over and over again where, you know, he's 2 bags in his hand because he got to go talk someplace, right? He got to go conference someplace. You know, what was it like trying to navigate that, particularly when you knew that part of it was that your father was really engaged in serious intellectual work?
Well, I think that last part is kind of, that's where it differs because, see, when you're a kid, you're just a kid. You know what I mean? I wrote this book from the perspective of me starting at around 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. So no, my thought wasn't, oh, he's engaged in some, I didn't even know what serious intellectual work was, you know what I'm saying? And I really didn't make that connection. All I knew is that, you know, my pops was gone. You know what I'm saying? Like, he wears dashikis and he's gone. You know what I mean? So I didn't really make the connection to like, well, what he's doing, and you know, and my mom wasn't you know, physically and mentally well, so she wasn't explaining it to me probably in the way that my dad probably would have liked. And so for me, it was just kind of like he was always gone, and so that was difficult. It wasn't until later on in my life that I realized, oh wow, what you were doing and how I was connected to it, and you know, and I really appreciate it. But one of the things I like to do in this book is about brother relationship, it's about mom and son relationship, and it's about father and son relationship. You know, I talk about, you know, Frederick Douglass said, right, no struggle, no progress. And one thing about this book is obviously filled with struggle, but it's filled with progress. You know, me and my pop, we had a tumultuous relationship, turbulent relationship. I didn't understand when I was young why he made some of the decisions he made, you know, and I had you know, we had real issues, you know, it's written about in the book, real issues, you know, with him and my mom, and she even writes about that in her diary about them, you know.
And, I mean, that's an interesting part also, I mean, like almost like this Color Purple moment, but your mother's voice is centered in the book, right? We get to read her diary entries that just even fill out even more so, you know, the information that you're giving us about the stuff that you're navigating.
Exactly, because I read those diary entries, you know what I mean? As a kid, I used to sneak and read those, and I wanted that to be a part of it, you know. I wanted to get another voice. And even my brother's letters from prison, you know what I mean? Even my one letter from my sister from California, you know, getting everybody's voice in there, because we really are, you know, a culmination of all these voices and people, you know what I mean? And so, but we and my mom, me and my dad, you know, so me and my dad is tumultuous throughout the whole thing, but then there's that moment at the end of the book where, well, toward the end of the book where, you know, I'm in jail, I'm in the 35th precinct, he comes to get me out, he's pissed, you know, got that, you know, my dad's from Georgia, you know, he doesn't really play that, you know what I mean? So he's pissed, we're driving, and he says to me, seems like you want to fight me. Do you want to fight me? And I was like, yeah. You know what I mean? I had been in jail the weekend, and we had so much like built up, you know, but I still had so much love and respect for him, and I know he loved me, but it was just, we were at that moment, and I was like, you know, yeah. So he pulled the car over on Broad Street. I know you know Broad Street in Philly, like the biggest street, you know what I mean, right in front of Checkers. And we get out, and we just start, you know what I mean, scrapping, like, and
it's a rite of passage.
It's a rite of passage. I just remember him being on top of me at the end, and he was pressing the words into me, you know, I love you, boy, I love you, boy. And then we went and got some white soul food from across the street. And then that was like the beginning of our whole new relationship.
You know, it reminds me of that scene in A Soldier's Play, A Soldier's Story, right? You know, where, you know, the one character is always fighting with the sergeant, right? And they finally have the fight, right? And he gets his ass kicked, right? But the sergeant then has all this respect for him, right? Because that's when he had kind of made this transition.
Yeah, so no, it was totally one of those moments, you know, and Charles Fuller, who wrote that, that's actually a good friend of my dad.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. But yeah, no, yeah, that was our moment. And then, you know, the book obviously ends with me and him in Egypt, of all places, in Abu Simbel, watching the sunset, and really, you know, so that was the whole beginning of a very, but without that struggle though, we would have never been where we are, and even where we are now, you know, is real tight, and you know, we had to go through a lot to get there, so.
You're watching Left to Black. I'm your host, Mark Anthony Neal. We're joined in studio today by author, poet, writer, filmmaker, MK Asante. I'm sure they're brothers that always make that mistake.
They do, because they think and they just think.
And we're talking about MK Asante's new book, Buck, a memoir. Talk a little bit about what you're hoping, well, two things, right? The first one is like, you know, what has your family response been to the book, right? Because, you know, old school folks would say that you're airing dirty laundry. So what has been the response? I mean, have they read the book and what has been their response?
Yeah, well, you know, everybody's read the book, you know what I'm saying? And their response has been they support me, you know what I'm saying? They support me telling my story, my truth, the way I see it. My whole family is basically artists, you know what I mean? Like on every side. So, and even the ones that aren't artists, they understand art in some way, you know what I'm saying? So they also, they supported, they were supporting me the whole time I wrote, they support it now, you know what I'm saying? The only thing I think that one has to consider when you write a memoir, it's like me and you could go outside right now and we could go look at, what street is it? Irwin Street. And we could stand out there for 30 minutes. Then the next day I could be like, all right, Mark, you write something about what we saw, and I write something. And it'll be a little bit different. Piece, But then if I asked you like 10 years from now, yo, remember when we was on Irwin Street? Could you write something? And it'll be like, totally there's things that you remember that I don't remember. So I think we all acknowledge in my family that perspective changes things. If you're sitting over here and I'm sitting here, there may be something that I can't see that you can see, and vice versa. And so they acknowledge that, but yeah, they support me, man.
You know, there's a lot of research that talks about the gap, you know, educational gaps, right? And one of the things that comes up with black boys in particular is this point where they stop reading. And I thought, you know, one of the things that was important when Jay-Z did Decoded a few years ago, right? It was actually a deliberate attempt to get young cats to read something. I mean, is that something that you're really hoping?
Definitely. I mean, my dedication is to all the young bucks. You know what I mean? I wrote this for the, you know, the best compliment I ever received was, it was a dude who ran a juvenile detention center, and he told me, he's like, yo, I give your books, and this dude, Sherman Alexie, I give your books, y'all books to kids who hate reading. And that really resonated with me. You know, when I was young, I never saw a book like Buck, ever. You know what I'm saying? Like, and so, that would have changed a lot for me. Like, it was, you know, On the Road connected to me. That was written by a dude in the 50s, a white dude, you know, completely different, you know what I'm saying? Completely different background experience. But there was something in it that resonated with me just because of the spirit and because of the rebelliousness, because I've always been rebellious against authority. So that was something that I resonated with. So for me, Buck is definitely, you know, people say young people don't read. I disagree. I've seen so many people who technically don't read reading Buck. Like, we go read down North Philly, 25th and Newkirk. The whole block is reading Buck. You know what I mean? You got people reading Buck who they don't read Buck. You know, people who are young who, they not really into school. So and also you got cats at Harvard reading it or whatever, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, I wanted to be that bridge, and but I feel like the key to that is, and that's why I chose the narrative form, is just being completely honest. You know what I'm saying? Like, the key to that is when, you know, like you said, when you read, oh, Joe Jackman, whoever, you know, you're like, oh man, this is like, okay.
This is real.
So it's like, I wanted to write something that young people would connect with, because young people, we live in an age today where, you know, with social media and everything, young people, they're so hip to like BS and stuff, like they can see through things, you know, everything has to be transparent. And so I wanted to write something that was going to connect with them, that was going to speak their language, but not just their language. To me, Buck speaks a universal language. I mean, you don't have to be, you know, 17 to get it, you know, or 25. You could be whatever, you know what I mean? It's really, to me, it's universal, it's multi-generational. intergenerational. You know, I think that's what the truth does. When I was writing Buck, I went to see Dr. Maya Angelou. I was speaking at Wake Forest, and right before my event, I went to see her. And, you know, I told her, I was actually struggling with it for a minute, you know what I'm saying? And I went to see her, and I'm struggling with my new memoir, and she said, well, just tell the truth. She said, if you tell the truth, it's going to connect with everybody. You know what I mean? She said, you don't have to worry about nothing, just tell the truth. So I really took, I remember that night, I called Maya, I'm like, yo, I got this. Like, I know what I got to do. I just got to, you know what I mean? I just got to tell the truth. So, you know, yeah, so that's been my whole thing, you know.
You've been watching Left of Black. We've been joined today with MK Asante, new memoir, Buck. Joined us here in the John Hope Franklin studios. Thanks for coming through, MK.
Hey, appreciate you for having me, man.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Black lights and booze burn when I record for Watts, and every black like Troy Davis who never had a fair shot. All black everything, everything black, culture over everything, y'all. We taking it back. Black.